This happened back in 1980 when I was only 9 years old. I lived in one of the countless stilt villages that stood above the Amazon River, along with my parents and then the siblings, Pedro and Isa, my closest and only childhood friends. The nearest city was more than 300 kilometers away, and the only way one could reach us was by boat. We were a very traditional village, and at the time, there were not even any telephone lines there. It was a very small building, created to help educate children from both the local stilt villages and the nearby native tribes. It was funded completely by NGOs because the government itself did not have interest on a bunch of poor, non-taxpayers who lived in Nowheresville. The situation got a bit better when democracy was restored, but at that time, we were only seen as nuisances at best. I can remember everything from that fateful day, crystal clear. A storm came out of nowhere, and we had to put our boat ashore and walk back home on foot because our usual transportation would not be able to navigate it under such turbulent conditions. Isa suggested we could go back to school, but I refused. And I said it was only rain, that we could go home on foot. And to this day, I feel guilty for saying that. And how completely naive I was. The idea went terribly. We had to hold ourselves on the trees because the soil below us rapidly turned to mud, and the Amazon River was completely overflowing. And desperately, I climbed up one of the trees and prayed there were not any snakes on the tree branches. And as I tightly held myself there and prayed the storm would not knock the whole tree down. And after 45 minutes, the storm had calmed down, but I was completely exhausted. And I climbed down the tree, and then I don't know what happened next because I collapsed and passed out. And I woke up during the night with scratches, cuts, and insects all over my body. I was hurt and tired, and my friends were nowhere to be seen. And I screamed their names, but no one answered. I was all alone in the woods, hoping with all my heart that they had gotten home safely, and that they were not dragged into the river by the storm. And if they fell down there, they would surely die, either by drowning or by being eaten alive by piranhas or any other deadly Amazon creature. And I ended up going back home, following the course of the river. And it took me hours. My legs were killing me, and I was so hungry. When I finally got home, it was around midday of the following day. All the other villagers were as surprised as they were glad to see me. My mother hugged me so hard, and I wished I could return her warmth, but I could barely stand straight. My father, who never liked to demonstrate his feelings, had his eyes wet with tears. Sadly, it wasn't the end of it all. And it turned out my friends had never made it back to our village. Their parents kept asking me what I remembered, what happened, but I couldn't answer them, as I didn't know. Several villagers went back into the woods looking for them, but nothing was found. Even the nearby native tribes helped, but nothing. Sadly, I was not able to go with them at the beginning. The whole thing was very harmful to my health. I spent several days in bed, feverish. My father went all the way to the nearest big city, located several hours away, to get me medicines. But the medicine ended up giving me an allergic reaction, and I had to be in bed for even more days. Only 3 weeks later was I able to get up. But before that happened, something strange happened in the second week or so of my sickness. One night, I was staring out my window at the side of my bed, and we did not have glass in our windows as it was too expensive, but we did have little protective nets that kept the mosquitoes outside. As it was not raining that day, and the crime in our village was literally non-existent, the wooded panels were open. I was watching the moonlight shining across the trees, wondering if my friends were okay. And then I saw them. 2 bodies, completely decomposed, with several missing patches of skin and flesh, and even missing limbs. Their state was horrible, but I immediately knew they were Pedro and Isa. Even with their faces completely decayed and destroyed, I knew it was them.
"You killed us! You killed us!"
They kept screaming at me.
"You convinced us to go back on foot."
I couldn't sleep that night, and just before the sun rose, I heard them jump in the river, and then saw the sun rising. And after that, every night I was visited by them, and I was terrified of them, but was even more of telling my parents and the other villagers that it was me who caused the whole tragedy, and that I decided to go back in the storm, and that I had indirectly caused their death. After the 3 weeks, when I was finally able to get out of my bed, I waited for them to show up, and then I went to the window and asked them, "What will it take for you to leave me alone?" Isa answered,
"We want to show you where we died, so you can tell our parents, so they can bury us and say goodbye."
"Where did you die?"
"Not very far away. We almost made it back home, but we were too tired and wounded. We stopped to rest and died."
This was a dumb idea, but in my defense, I was 9 years old. I followed my rotting friends into the woods, well past midnight. The sky was very clouded that day, so I could not see very well. And after some 20 minutes of walking, we reached a small hill, hidden among the trees. In this hill, there was a cave. It seemed to be lit from inside, from what looked like fire. I was about to enter the cave when I stopped myself. "Wait, you told me you drowned." I looked at Isa and Pedro.
"Our bodies are inside. You need to see them."
Isa said, looking at me with her cold, empty eye sockets. There's fire inside. There's someone in there. Why is there someone in the cave?"
"It was us who lit the fire before we died."
"You've been dead for weeks," I said, at the same time I started slowly walking back. Pedro and Isa's face contorted, their putrid muscles twisting into unbelievably large smiles. Their teeth they were not teeth, they were fangs. I was paralyzed momentarily by fear, and they started approaching me. And at that moment, something inside me knew that if they came too close, I would die. They would kill me as payback for what I did. And I turned around and ran. I ran so much that I could barely breathe. I injured my feet multiple times and scratched my entire body, but I never stopped running. I wasn't even sure if they were running after me, but I just ran and ran and ran. I didn't want to die. When I arrived home, I went to my parents' bedroom, which didn't have windows, and hid with them. I hid until the sun was back. The next morning, I gathered courage and knocked on my deceased friend's door. To my surprise, it was Isa who opened up. She was not rotten or smiling creepily. She was completely fine. Seemed tired, but was fine. "Isa, you're alive," I exclaimed, flabbergasted. "What? You thought I was dead?" How did you survive?" "Pedro and I ran when you were climbing that tree. We were found unconscious by some sailors, and they took us to the hospital in the city." "But why did it take you so long to come back?" "The hospital could not let us leave alone. They waited until our parents went there looking for us. Why are you so pale?" I'm sorry I caused all this." "It was stupid of you, but we also decided to go back in the middle of a storm. We were also wrong that day." "Where is Pedro?" "He's still in the hospital. He he was covered in bite marks when they found us. Really big ones. I think an alligator attacked him or something. And after that, things went back to normal. But we didn't stay in the village much longer. 2 months later, my parents decided this was a place too dangerous for us to live. We moved to a small town near Manaus, where I still live. And I ended up becoming a teacher. And I don't know what became of Pedro and Isa after that. 2 days ago, I went back to my old home. The stilt village is still there, but no one that I knew lived there anymore. No one remembered any Pedro or Isa. But yesterday, something strange happened. I woke up during the night. Man, I could swear that I saw Pedro and Isa's rotting bodies staring at me with their sharp, inhuman teeth.